So this evening, the talk I'm going to give is entitled "Money, Politics, and Pandemics." And the truth is there could have been a wide range of different topics for tonight's class, but I thought I would take on some things that are a little bit topical right now and in this era. And what we're going to do tonight is explore what it means to study and to do economics. First, we'll start off with a little icebreaker so I can get a sense on who you guys are and what your interests are in economics. But then we're going to hop right in and you guys are going to participate in an experiment. And this experiment is going to seem quite weird and abstract to begin with, but once we're done with it, I'm going to talk a little bit about how economists think of the way that people make decisions, and then relate it to this experiment, and then talk a little bit about how this experiment relates to the real world. If at any point you have a question, please press the raise hand reaction. There's quite a few of you in here and it's difficult for me to see everyone, but as soon as you press that button, you'll pop up on my screen and I'll be able to call upon you. And please don't be shy at all to ask questions or make comments, okay? So our icebreaker activity is going to have you join a website called Miro. I will send out the link in just a second. And on this website, you'll see two boards with a bunch of post-it notes on them. And I would like you to take one of those post-it notes. I'm hoping that there's enough, but if there aren't, you can grab more on this page and answer two questions. The first question is, why are you interested in economics? Presumably because you guys are taking a class in the evening, there must be some sort of interest here, and I'm curious to hear why you're interested. And the second question I'd like you to respond to is, what do you think you learn from studying economics? So again, give me one moment, and I will put this link in our chat box. Now, let me just send this to everybody. Okay. So there we are. So please click on that link and it will take you to this page. If you have any questions, again, raise your hand. In its purest form and most simplest form, we think of decision-making being affected by two things. One is our beliefs about what we believe is going on, what we think is going on. This is certainly something that's very important in an experiment like this, where there is a degree of uncertainty going on. And the second aspect of our sort of mental hierarchy and architecture is the fact that we have preferences. We've got something that we're trying to accomplish, whether that is to make the most money or to do the best that we can. And what we see is that in trying to achieve these goals, that we're going to face a series of trade-offs here. So how does all this come together and result in a decision? We ultimately have to have some sort of information that starts us off, that gives us some initial thought and triggers our preferences to understand the environment that we're in. And once we've gone through that processing, we make a decision. And so this is how I want to make a little change to it. And this little change is what's really captured in this experiment, or what I'm trying to capture in this experiment. And so this little Venn diagram here kind of picks up on the general philosophy and on how I think about decision making, and in particular, how I think about us processing information that relates to our decision making. And so there is some sort of scientific objective information out there. Each time I was showing you a different stick, it was coming from the same bag. I was not manipulating anything. And so that was your real piece of information. But what you see and how you interpret that is often affected by your beliefs And what I tried to do in this little experiment is manipulate your beliefs before things even started. And so here's how I think about how different situations and different environments can bias how we process information and then ultimately our decisions, is that stemming from the information, our brain interprets it in a different way. And the reason why our brain interprets information in a different way than other people comes down to some prior belief, some prior opinion and idea. Okay. So this was the spirit of this experiment. I'm going to say too much we're going to do right now is I'm going to put you guys into small breakout rooms of roughly 5 people. In these breakout rooms, I want you guys to discuss and think about how our experiment relates to this simple model of biased decision making. So what is it that your goal is in this experiment? What were you trying to achieve? What was the information that you were being given? And how do you think I manipulated your beliefs in order to try to drive different types of decision making? So give me one moment to open up some breakout rooms here.
I can open the breakout rooms. I have set it up. Is that okay?
Sure, as long as they're for roughly 5 or so people. I'd like to see if anyone here would care to take a guess at it. So if you think you have some idea of how this experiment relates to our simple model of decision making, please raise your hand and I'd love to hear what you have to say. Great. All right. Let's start with Xiaobao. Xiaobao, what are your thoughts?
Hi, Professor. So I think it relates to the simple model of decision making, the way we choose the bet of the 2 bet by we define the color of the you draw out of the bag. You know, it's like you get the information, then you choose based on that. It's like the way I think it's really in that way. Yeah.
Okay. Ying Luan, do you have some thoughts?
Oh, as I can see in the biased decision making model, so I see the objective facts and what confirm your beliefs. So I think objective facts here is, you know, the instructions about the information about the number of blue sticks and white. To make the final decision. So I think that is the
how would you describe this?
I mean, we all know that we can be safely make money by just putting 10 into each bag every time you draw out a stake. But I think that, okay, the objective, the goal is to make as much money as possible. So I divide my money by 12 and 8. Like, I think that the experiment hinted at it at the start and the instruction, but okay, so the bias, which was what I thought was very objective facts of statistics. So in the first 10 draws, at about draw 10, you have drawn 6 whites and 4 blues, which it was a very ideal ratio for back B. So from then on, I throw 20 into back B. But the ending ratio, you draw like 10 blue and 9 whites. And I think, oh, if I were to put my money into the stock market, I am going to lose all of it. That was my thought process.
Okay, thank you very much for sharing. Kanyan?
Yeah. So I think people don't know which color you will take out of the bag, so they will bet. The first choice is half and half, and the second choice is bet all in just.
Juan?
I think when you draw out each stick each round, I think it's does not affect the decision that I make, because I think each round is the probability of drawing another stick is independent, and it does not affect with the result of another round. So I think that the ratio, the bet of bet 1 and bet 3, bet B is 50-50. But I remember that I read in the description that if the bet is bet B, you will have more money. So my decision is consistent from round 1 to round 20, that I own in bet B.
Okay, interesting. Does anybody have a guess on what the manipulation was? How I tried to bias your beliefs? Yes, Huang Min?
Hi. So I think that because we had to place a bet on every round, so each and every reveal would affect our result. So for a while, I think from round 6 to until round 18, the ratio is there is always more white than blue. So we always put more bets on a bag B. But in the end, the number of as others has said, there was 10 blue and 9 white, so it's kind of a 50-50. But because for a long while there was more white than blue, so we always pick bag B. I think that is the manipulation here.
Okay, so then so this is good. I think then the manipulation worked, because the idea of it is that you shouldn't be aware of it. And so how you guys differed based on how you answered one of the very first questions that you were asked, and that was, what month were you born in? And the idea there is that whatever month you're born in is somewhat random, and so I put you into 2 somewhat random groups. In other words, I would predict that it's equally as likely to find the same ratio of male to female students in both groups. To Vietnam, and that's important. Is chosen. So one group we'll call the bag A group would get a bonus if bag A was chosen. And it turned out in our experiment that it is in fact, oh, it's not showing up, bag A that was chosen. So those of you who were in that group would receive a bonus on this. The other group had the exact opposite bonus. If it was bag B that I had chosen, then you would receive bonus. Now, this should not change how you play this game. How you play this game, as one of you had noted, is that you are motivated to try to make as much money as possible. I am giving you little bits of information about which bag, and with that information, you're supposed to make more optimal decisions. Now, the way that the colored sticks came out in this particular turn led a lot of people awry, because you're absolutely right. At the beginning, it seemed like there were more whites coming out, and near the end, it seemed like there were more blues coming out. And so really, everybody in this experiment should have just been focusing on that information. But in the back of your mind, you have this horse in the race that you want to win. So half of you were really hoping that it was bag A, and the other half were really hoping that it was bag B. And this may not have worked quite as perfectly in this session of the experiment for a variety of reasons. One, I find running experiments online to be a little bit more challenging to ensure. Two, we shouldn't rewarding which mental idea of what the ratio is at any given time. And so there was a little bit of extra information and a little bit of noise coming through the fact that we're doing this online. So how we can think about each aspect of this experiment is as follows. These bags represent two different states of the world. We can think of them as good and bad, right and wrong, and losing. Okay. The pens, or the little sticks that I'm pulling out, represent the state of the world. Okay, and so as I pulled out more whites, you started thinking that the true state was bag B. As I pulled out more blues, you started thinking the true state was bag A. The bets that you were supposed to place are meant to represent your beliefs. And so as you became more certain that it was one bag or the other, you should have been placing more bets on that bag versus the other. And then again, this bonus payment that you were all going to receive was conditional on whether a particular bag had been chosen. Okay, so that was the spirit behind this. And now let's just take a quick look at what our results look like. So, like I said, there's a lot of noise that comes through in these online experiments for a bunch of reasons. One thing, though, that shows up consistently is what happens in the very first round that you make your bets when you've received no information. So at this point, you should be under the impression that it was a 50-50 chance that I chose bag A or bag B. And what we see here is that those that were in the bag B treatment, those that would receive a bonus if bag B was chosen, in general, most people responded that way by placing 10 bets on bag A and 10 bets on bag B. So if you can't see the axes here, the vertical axis is picking up the median decision for the number of bets in bag A. And I've chosen the median because when we don't have large data sets, sometimes averages can get skewed if there's a small number of people that are doing rather extreme things. And so in the past, I had one student or one participant who thought the best thing to do would be on all the odd rounds, place 20 bets on bag A, and on all the even rounds, put 20 bets on bag B. Okay. So what we see here with our orange line is that in that very first round, without any information given, that those in the bag behaved as a rational person would, but we do see quite a difference with our bag A treatment group. They, despite receiving no additional information, A that was chosen. And what we notice here, if we start looking at these two lines, is that for quite a while, despite receiving the exact same information, the team that was, or the group of students who were going to get a bonus if bag A was chosen, placed more bets on bag A. And this continued on for quite some time until it looked as though a few people might have gotten nervous in the A group, because around round 17, we start to see a flip in things. But the general better run versions of this experiment is that our two groups start to diverge. And they diverge in a systematic way that regardless of what the information is, they are always on average placing more bets on the bag that they're going to receive a bonus for. So that's what our results look like. That's what the idea behind the experiment is. But now what I want us to do is think of how this weird little experience you guys just had might relate to the real world. And so remember that the title of my talk today was Money, Pandemics, and Politics. Events. I want you guys to do now individually, and give me a quick moment. I had anticipated a few more breakout rooms than we had, and I just want to remember what the total are. So it's 30. Okay. So if you were in breakouts 1 through 10, I want you to address topic number 1. So topic number 1 who are the two different types of behavior from this experiment? 20, I would like you to right now individually write about the second topic. The second topic has a series of questions that begins, how does this experiment relate to politics? In other words, voting behavior. What in the experiment represents different political beliefs? For example, whether you vote more for a left-leaning candidate or a right-leaning. The two bags represent what about drawing sticks? Says how does this experiment relate to policies combating the spread of policies? What in the experiment represents different beliefs in the effect two bags represent? What about the different sticks from the bags? Who are the two different types of social distancers, and how do they differ? So I'm going to give you a few minutes right now on your own to think about and write down answers to these questions. Then again, we'll open up the breakout rooms where I would like you to take some time discussing with those in the room what your thoughts are on this. And then we'll come back together. And I'd like to hear from some people in each of the different types of breakout rooms, what their thoughts are on how this experiment relates to these scenarios. Just yes. So before we go into breakout rooms, I want to give you guys time on your own to really think about this. All right. So I've opened up breakout rooms. Please join them. I'll give you a little over 5 minutes to discuss, and then when we come back, I'll again ask for volunteers to report out.
Do you mean the breakout room from 1 to 20?
Yeah, so before tonight's demo class began, I was under the impression that maybe we would end up using 50, and I just put those numbers in and haven't been able to. But if anybody who's in a breakout room that was discussing how this experiment relates to investing would like to share, please do. Okay, great. Thank you, Huang Min.
Yeah, so I think in this experiment, the stock portfolio is what is like it is what is your bet, like what did you bet on the two bags. The two bags here represents like stocks going up or down, and each stick in those bag would be like a stock. So like generally, like you may know that some stocks would probably do better than others, but it's not always the case. Like it's just like it has the tendency to the probability to go up is higher than go down, or vice versa. And drawing sticks from the back is probably like the market as a whole. So it is quite random, but it is very unpredictable. So you cannot like always. So the stock going up doesn't mean it will always go up. Like it's just like in the when you draw the stick, when you pick the one stick, you don't really know which bag it belongs to. So that is like how I'm looking at this experiment comparing to the stock market.
Okay, okay. Thanks, Hongmin. Does anybody else have something they'd like to share regarding how this experiment relates to investing? All right. So maybe, oh, yes, Tracy.
Yeah, in my opinion, they are all based on probability. Like either in this experiment or in investing in real life, people people should choose the one that have the higher probability to choose or to invest in.
See? Out which of these two stock portfolios would represent the state of the world where the blue stock portfolio is more attractive, while bag B will represent the state of the world where the white portfolio is more attractive. And so what we're trying to do here is get you to think about which investment you should be making based on information that comes out here. So placing bets on the likelihood of bag A was chosen captures your belief on whether the blue portfolio is the more profitable one. Now the manipulation, and this is what sort of makes two different types of investors, if you would, is whether you were receiving a bonus for bag A or not. And actually, when I do run this for actual research papers, there's a third group, a control group. They receive no bonus well, they are not made aware of a bonus at the beginning, only at the very end. Okay. And so how does this relate to the to how I think about investment and how I think about people behaving as investors? If you have bought a stock, everybody wants to believe that they've bought the right stocks, the stocks that are going to make them the most money. And so when they see the price of that stock increase, i.e. a little bit of information that this is a good stock to invest in, they tend to want to invest more. They down a little bit, they brush it off, or they're more or less likely to make a rash decision and sell off all of this. And so if you think about this, if we want to understand something about how bulky, the fact that there's ample evidence and information out there that's suggesting that this is not going to be a profitable investment. And so how I think about this control group, which didn't exist in our class, the group that's not manipulated at the beginning, is that that is how we would actually interpret the stock data if we didn't have any money invested. We wouldn't have one particular stock portfolio that we were really hoping would do well. And in other words, we would just be affected by the information, and that's what would be driving our decisions. So before I go to my slide on politics and voting, I'd like to call upon anyone who is in a breakout room that was discussing how this experiment relates to voting to share what they were discussing. This was produced by an undergrad student at MIT when I was in grad school. And what he had done is he had looked at all the legislative decisions in the United States going back many, many decades. And all of the legislators either represented the Republican Party in red or the Democratic Party in blue. And what he did is he connected a person on the blue side with a person from the red side anytime they voted the same way on a given bill. And what you see, even in this sort of smaller picture of it, is that over time, these groups are less likely to be voting in the same way. So if you look sort of in the middle of the screen around 1991, there's some connection still between the red dots and the black dots as far as their voting goes. By 99, there's virtually nothing. And by 2007, we now have two perfectly bifurcated groups or polarized groups in the United States. And so I found myself first thinking this was a really interesting way to illustrate the polarization that was taking place in the United States. But it led me along this line of research that was asking this question, well, why is that? Why do we see these groups over time becoming less and less similar as far as how they're interpreting the world and what's best for the world? And while there's likely to be a few different motivations that drive people in these directions, I was really interested in the psychology behind it, because in psychology, one thing that's discussed quite a bit about how we think about information comes down to the psychological comfort or discomfort that we experience from information. And we experience psychological discomfort, sometimes referred to as cognitive dissonance, anytime we receive information that conflicts with what our beliefs are. And so it was with this in mind that I started a research agenda that was trying to understand the psychological underpinnings that would be driving people in these kinds of directions. All of our economic theories at this point had people behaving in a very rational manner, and any model that was going to predict differences in political voting often boiled things down to socioeconomic background, where you would think that the rich would be more in favor of right-leaning policies that were much in favor of reducing taxes and reducing the amounts of redistribution, and poorer people would be more in favor of a left-leaning party that was much more in favor of higher taxes and greater amounts of redistribution. However, again, looking in the data, you don't see that to be as strong of a driving force as you would need to think to see this kind of change in the beliefs of these two groups. And so again, this experiment was in part trying to understand why anybody from a breakout room that was discussing the global pandemic and how this experiment might relate to it, if they had thoughts? And if not, I'll just, what we see around And while Vietnam is certainly been a country that's kind of led the way in having a greater proportion of society following distancing policies, in many other parts of the world, we see that it's really kind of driving countries and communities apart. So again, relating this back to this experiment, we can think about the information that we're pulling out as information on how severe COVID is in our current locality. So you can imagine that every blue stick is representing an infected person, every white stick is representing an uninfected person. Then what we're thinking about with these bags is that they're representing different policies that vary in how much they want to open up the society and the economy, or how much they want to lock it down. And so, again, we can think about trying to understand the differences in opinions and behaviors as it relates to the current global pandemic is being captured within this experiment. And so on this note, I'd like to sort of wrap things up and open the mic for any possible questions. So I'll just throw this out there and say, for those of you that have stayed on and kept up with this, I greatly appreciate your time and effort. And I hope to see some of you guys in my classes in the next year. And again, if you would like to ask any questions, I'm here to answer. So please just raise your hand and I'll call on you. Yes, Chang'an.
Hello, Professor. Thank you so much for your speech today. It was really nice. And I want to ask that I'm really interested in economics, and I want to ask if there are any resource that is easy to understand, like your speech today, because the books that I've been finding online are like all of text, and it's really hard to understand. So are there any ways